Next speaker is John Bush. Is John Bush here? And John, you have 4 people signed up donating time. Is James Wilson in the room? James Wilson. Jim Stutzman has already used his 3 minutes, so he can't donate time to you. Heather King-Fazio. Okay. Is that really you? I think you've got a mask on. Okay, thank you. Okay, I recognize you now. All right. Katie Brewer? Katie? Thank you. Mr. Bush, you will have 12 minutes.
Thank you, Council. You'll have to excuse the mask. Fusion Center, the whole idea of Fusion Center and these surveillance cameras we got going makes me a little bit paranoid, especially when you throw in the mix the potential, and the software has been developed. It's called the Human ID program. And on top of that, they have the Advanced Facial Recognition program, which will actually allow for up to 5,000 feet away these surveillance cameras to scan your face, match it with the picture that we already have on a database thanks to the DPS, and identify you as you're walking around in your daily activities. Not only that, but the advanced recognition, which you can bet your bottom dollar will all tie into the Fusion Center, will actually have the ability for behavior analysis based on the facial expressions that you're making. And I'm not making any of this up. This is all in the documents. It's called the Total Information Awareness Program, which, interestingly enough, is where the software for the Fusion Centers came from. It was called Genoa 2. So I'll lose the mask so you can see my behavior and analyze it. I want to make it clear, the chief has claimed that the Fusion Center is only going to deal with criminal behavior or with previous arrest records. That is not the case at all, as outlined in the Fusion Center guidelines, the Department of Justice guidelines for how Fusion Centers will be operated. They will have an all-crimes approach, and I'll elaborate here in a second on the private sector component. Now, the chief may say, and I'm a big fan of the chief, he seems to be accountable and respect our privacy and whatnot, but the thing is, Chief Acevedo is not always going to be here. So what I'd like to see come from this council, come from this body, come from this government, come from our elected representatives are solid guarantees that this privacy will not be abused, that we won't start with simple arrest records going into the database and end up with everything, like Jim Stutzman said, from your Randall's card to the beer that you purchase, because there is a retail component in the private sector component from the Fusion Center guidelines, which are supposed to govern these Fusion Centers. So I'm going to start. It's interesting, the only article really that covered the Austin Fusion Center was from KXAN, December 2008. And in this, they said that they were going to have the Fusion Center up and running in 10 months. So, yeah, luckily for us, that hasn't happened yet. But that was the only article, really. Debbie Russell referred to the resolution that was passed when the Patriot Act came out, and this body stood firm protecting the civil liberties of the council. I just want to reiterate one of the whereases. The preservation of civil rights and liberties is essential to the well-being of a democratic society. I think this is one of the most important tenets coming out of this resolution we all need to recognize. When we have surveillance cameras around, when we have intelligence gathering and intelligence disseminating apparatuses built in the United States, it kind of has a chilling effect on people's First Amendment rights to free speech, especially when you see the train of abuses that has occurred not only in Texas but throughout the entire country. I'm about to go into that train of abuses in hopes to show that the Fusion Center isn't something that should just be rubber stamped. I know you guys have your hands full. We got the budget process going on. We have comprehensive planning going on. But we can't just allow this stuff to get rubber stamped and move on down the road, regardless of the assurances that the chief may or may not give us. He hasn't told you the full story about the potential implications to our privacy and our civil liberties that come along with the Fusion Center. So I'm going to start by just giving you the definition of a Fusion Center from the Fusion Center Guidelines, which again is the main governing document for the Fusion Center apparatus. It says a Fusion Center is defined as a collaborative effort of 2 or more agencies that provides resources, expertise, and information to the center with the goal of maximizing their ability to detect, prevent, investigate, and respond to criminal and terrorist activity. That's a pretty big mouthful. It goes on to mention that they want these databases to be interoperable. So everything that goes into the Austin Regional Intelligence Center will then be accessible by the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice, the FBI, CIA, National Security Agency, you name it. Once we create this node of information dispersal, then everybody's going to be able to get their hands on the intelligence gathered on we Austinites. And again, Chief may say that it's only going to start on arrest, but as I get into the suspicious activity reports that tie along with this, you'll see that they're actually calling for suspicious activity reports to be gathered for non-criminal behavior, which is a direct violation of federal code and the United States Constitution. I want to start by illustrating how the anti-terror apparatus, I call it a monstrosity and a leviathan, that was developed after 9/11 originated to protect us from foreign terrorists, but now we see it being introverted and it's now being applied in an all-crimes approach on United States citizens. I'll start by an FBI bulletin from 2003. This is right after the war started in Iraq. A lot of major protests were forming. The FBI was worried about that. They said most protests are peaceful events. However, a number of demonstrations, including the biannual International Monetary Fund and World Bank meetings, are more likely to be violent and disruptive and to require enhanced law enforcement security. They go on to say that the FBI should be on high alert anytime there's a mass rally, a massing of public people, which of course is protected by the First Amendment. I also want to point out in Maryland in 2006, I believe, 2005 and 2006, the Maryland State Police were directed by the federal government to place 14 activists on the terror watch list based on their anti-war and pro-environment. Some of them there's also right-wing extremists, there's left-wing extremists and environmentalists. They were placed on the terror watch list, straight up, no doubt about that. That's a complete abuse, and again, there's the chilling effect that it places on our First Amendment rights. Also, during the Republican National Convention in Minneapolis, 8 protesters were charged with terrorism under the Patriot Act for simply organizing protests. That's no joke. Recently, there's been End the Fed rallies. The Federal Reserve has been coming under more and more scrutiny. The Ron Paul crew, Campaign for Liberty, has organized End the Fed rallies. They actually dispersed the military to keep an eye on these protesters, because they're feeling threatened here, so they're dispersing the military. Again, it has a chilling effect. There could be people that, hey man, I'm not a fan of the Federal Reserve, but I'm not going to go out there. The military's there, for Christ's sakes. Now I want to go on to how the Fusion Center, there's 4 documented instances I'd like to go over where the Fusion Center apparatus in other states has actually been used against peaceful dissenters, again creating a chilling effect and diminishing our democratic society that we have. This is from the Colorado Independent. Colorado Fusion Center to step up intelligence gathering during the DNC. Federal and state law enforcement officials will increase intelligence operations during the Democratic National Convention. Central to the efforts is the Colorado Fusion Center, a place designated to facilitate intelligence sharing among federal, state, and military agencies. Colorado, they were doing it. Here's one of the biggest ones, Missouri Information Analysis Center, the modern militia movement. This one was actually leaked. Had it not been leaked, it never would have came out. What it does is it painstakingly analyzes the militia movement, bringing it under one unified front, going over the past histories, some violent extremism that's come out of it, talking about the reemergence of the movement, some of the things that right-wing extremists and militia members are against, which I happen to be against. I don't like being labeled a militia member. I don't even own a gun.